Hi, my name is Krista, and this is my chapter summary for Chapter 4 of Coercion and Its Fallout by Murray Sidman. Chapter 4 talks about punishment and how it's used in our society in order to control behavior. This is based on the belief that by punishing people, we can get them to act differently. Sometimes the punishment takes the form of removing positive reinforcers. For example, something less severe, like the act of taking away a toy from a child, to something more severe, like placing an individual in prison away from their family and loved ones. A specific phrase that Sidman used within the book that really stood out to me was, others use punishment as a way to control us, to stop or prevent our actions that hurt, deprive, or displease them. And I just found that very interesting, that he made that distinction about how punishment is used as a way to control other individuals. Another interesting distinction that he made was that the word justice in our society has come to mean punishment. The term justice will prevail was something that he specifically referenced in the book. Has made us feel secure in that punishment will be doled out to that individual who has misbehaved. In addition, he states that the time between when the behavior occurs and when the consequence is delivered determines the effectiveness of that punishment. And he cites a few clinical research studies involving rats, where the rats were first taught to push a lever to gain access to food, the positive reinforcer. And then they moved on to providing an immediate electric shock when that lever was pressed. However, the rats still received food, so they were combining the reinforcement value of food co-occurring with the punishment of the shock. And this caused a brief decrease in the rate of lever pressing, but that behavior always reemerged because the value of the reinforcer was higher than the punishing value of the shock. So, for example, the food fulfilled a basic need for that rat. So by decreasing, even though that they were receiving that shock and the behavior pressing the lever decreased, eventually the value of that reinforcer increased so much because of food deprivation that they chose to experience that punishing value of the shock because the food was so reinforcing to them. It had such a high reinforcement value. The analogy made within the chapter that I found very interesting compared the lever pressing to the behaviors of criminal offenders. So offenders are being released from prison with repertoires of behavior that are not acceptable within society. So how else are they supposed to gain access to reinforcement? In the experiment, the rat returned to pressing the lever despite the shocks because it was the only way that it could get food. So moving on from there, researchers postulated, what would happen if during that suppression phase, they hung a chain from the ceiling of the cage and taught the rat a new way to gain access to food. So whenever the rat would pull the chain, it gets food, but no shock. So by teaching a new behavior, the rat never returns to that life of crime. So, I think this is something interesting that we should be doing with the individuals that are within our criminal justice system, is that even nonviolent offenders are, being warehoused in prisons and then released, but not given the tools to succeed. On every job application you ever fill out, it asks if you've committed a felony. And there are certain things that are classified as felonies, drug charges, for example. Certain drug charges are considered a felony. And, what if that's the only way that they've ever been able to make money and put food on the table? What if there's other psychiatric things going on that they are using drugs to mask. So I think that's kind of the direction that Sidman was taking with this chapter, is that punishment, although it's effective in the short term, it's not effective in the long term, because when these criminals are warehoused, they're away from these lives of crime, but they're not being taught any other way to gain access to the things that they need. So once they are released, there might be a brief reduction in their criminal behavior, but the criminal behavior will return if they're not taught those different strategies in order to gain access to their reinforcers. So for my discussion questions, I want to preface this part of my presentation by using a direct quote from the book that I found very, very interesting. And it says, "What really happens to conduct that is punished? Certainly capital punishment gets rid of behaviors. It does so quite directly by killing the behavior. Does murder by society actually reduce murder by individuals?" So my question for y'all is, do you think capital punishment is an effective threat at curbing the behavior of committing violent acts? For example, does the threat of the death sentence, is that an effective deterrent from individuals who are considering committing a violent act against another individual? And if, in addition to that question, kind of adding on to that question a little bit, what other ways would you suggest that, what other strategies could we use as an alternative to punishment or threats at curbing these violent behaviors? And my second question is, do you think previous incarceration and the possibility of being incarcerated again keeps people from committing the same or similar crimes once they're released? So I hope those are both of my discussion questions. I hope that you have enjoyed this chapter 4 summary, and it's kind of given you a little bit more clarity on this chapter from Murray Sidman. I will post my discussion questions down below, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thanks for watching.